would bring global chaos. Joining us now, House Armed Services Committee member, Congressman John Garamendi, and we had a lot of discussions, Congressman, and the last thing I said to Colonel Jacobs was there really are well-intentioned people on both sides of this issue that, on one hand, that say that a chemical attack cannot go. You need to make a statement that it's unacceptable, and others that say, what's our end game? Why is this our responsibility? I can't tell where you come down. You want Congress to be involved, I think. Is that?
Well, two things. First of all, we cannot let chemical attacks go without an answer, and certainly this was an answer. The other part of it is it's an answer for which there is no legality. This is an attack on a foreign country. It is an act of war, and therefore Congress has to declare war, or what we now call an authorization to use military force. So both things are correct. Going forward, where do we go from here? And that leads us to the third question, which is there is no long-term strategy here. We're basically seeing the second incident of a one-off event. A year ago and 1 week, Trump bombed an airfield with cruise missiles, and now 1 year after that, he did it again. The question is there a long-term strategy? How do you deal with Syria going forward? Obviously, you have a very complex situation with Iran, a major player in the country of Syria, as well as Iraq. You have Turkey that has a critical interest in the area and now has an army in Syria. And certainly you have Russia there in a very, very big way, and the United States. So what we have to have here is a coherent strategy based upon a set of objectives, long-term objectives, hopefully dealing with a reduction in the violence, dealing with the refugees, and dealing with the fact that Assad is likely to be there for some time to come.
I guess in my initial question, the people what I was sort of referring to is that there are people that that wasn't the intention to cure all the problems of Syria and to have a long-term strategy on what we need to do with that civil war. That the intention was to make a statement that you're not allowed to use no one. It wouldn't matter whether it was Syria, whomever used chemical weapons, that there's going to be a response, and that was the reason for doing it. So the people that feel that way feel very strongly. Nikki Haley, for example. I don't think we have a solution. I don't know whether Bashar Assad stays. I don't know whether I don't know who you back there, what you tell Putin to do, any of that stuff. But their rationale was the first thing you do is say this is unacceptable and that will be met every time you do it, whomever you are, it's going to happen.
Well, if only life were that simple. If only this area of the world were that simple. The reality is this is the second time, 1 year apart, in which the United States has launched missiles in response to a chemical attack by the Assad government.
And if there was a third, we'd probably do it again. It gets more and more. I think the size and scope would be greater and greater.
Congressman,
I don't know about that, but I do know that unless we have a coherent strategy for this region, we're going to continue to find ourselves wandering from one side to the other, one side of an issue to another side of the issue, and we're not going to be able to find a solution to this. There has to be a response, and certainly that has occurred. The fact that United Kingdom as well as France engaged in it, very, very important. But what we need to do is to make sure that Russia carries out its responsibilities so that it does not encourage or allow Assad to have these chemical weapons. So these are all parts of it. If it was only as simple as launching 100 Tomahawk missiles, we could do that often, but that doesn't deal with the underlying problem. We have a government, Assad, that is willing to engage in horrific actions. He needs to be dealt with beyond just cruise missiles raining down on his facilities.
There are some congressional leaders who have said that they would like to be involved at this point, that Congress should be weighing in on this. Do you agree with that? And if that's the case, what would your plan be?
Well, certainly I do agree with it. When President Obama faced this same question in 2013, I, along with many others, said, Mr. President, you need to get congressional authority. Ultimately, he did request congressional authority. He did not launch an attack. He did work out a diplomatic solution to it with Russia and NATO, the result of which the chemical weapons were removed and all the precursors were also removed. At least that's what the United Nations Organization on the Convention of Chemical Weapons put forward, that there were no further chemical weapons. In the intervening 3.5, 4 years, obviously Assad did rebuild some of his chemical weapons arsenal, certainly with regard to chlorine gas, quite possibly also with sarin. So this is where the problem could and should have been dealt with, and that is to hold Russia to its previously announced commitment to prevent Assad from having chemical weapons. Now, going forward, we need to have a strategy. How do we prevent this from happening again? Another missile attack? Well, that's one way of doing it, but the previous didn't work. So that's what I'm saying. Now, with regard to Congress, could, and should have Congress passed some sort of a resolution authorizing this? My sense of it is a very narrowly constructed resolution saying the President has the authority to strike against the chemical weapon facilities. Would have passed very, very quickly in Congress. But that was never brought to Congress, and the leadership in both the House and the Senate did not even pursue such an activity. I think that's incorrect. The Constitution is perfectly clear about this. Only Congress can declare war. The President has no such authority. Once authorization to use force has been enunciated by Congress, then it's up to the President to develop a plan to carry it out.
All right, Congressman, thank you. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay.
When we come back, Bank of America is set to report. We will bring you those numbers and the reaction on Wall Street. That's straight